This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Is it just me? It feels like this post-Thanksgiving week was a super busy one. Even though the news has piled on, we made it to Friday. So it's time to go behind the headlines on stories like these.
The deadline passed for candidates to file petitions to be on the February ballot for Chicago mayor.
This is a tough environment for incumbents, and I'm very clear-eyed about that.
Looks like Chicago Alderman Ed Burt's 50-plus year career at City Hall will end quietly.
Mayor Lightfoot is under fire for her political connection to the Chicago fire.
A new judge will oversee a federal consent decree ordering the Chicago Police Department to make sweeping reforms.
See? Told you. Well, here to help us dive into the top local stories for our weekly news recap is Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5 Chicago. Welcome back, Christian.
Good to see you.
Dan Mihalopoulos is here, WBEZ investigative reporter on government and politics. Hey, Dan.
My pleasure always.
And joining us for the very first time here on the recap is Alice Yin, political reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Welcome, Alice.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to give a special shout out to the folks who are watching us right now break down the week's news live on WBEZ's Facebook and YouTube pages. You can also watch the live stream on Reset's Facebook page. All right, let's dig in, Alice. Monday was the last day to file the required 12,500 signatures that are needed to be a candidate for mayor. What was the scene like at the Board of Elections?
Yeah, in the morning, it was definitely a bit of a surprise because we knew the mayor had not planned to go for the first slot in the ballot. So we thought she would probably arrive around 4 p.m. to get the last slot on the ballot. But she actually showed up in the morning. There was some speculation it might have been because she wanted, the room to herself and not to be in the same room as Representative Garcia. But she kind of spun it as, I'm the mayor. I don't need to worry about these games in terms of being first or last. I'm confident in my standing in. She also mentioned, she had a city to run, although it's not her really collecting the petitions, but her volunteers.
Explain how that works with the slots. You mentioned placement on the ballots.
Yeah, so it's a lottery. If you show up for the first hour, the first day, you are guaranteed into the lottery, and then whoever gets selected is the top of the ballot, which, some say gives you a modest advantage, some say doesn't really matter. And then if you are at the last hour on the last day of filing, which was Monday, then you are entered into a lottery for the last slot.
Yeah. So now that the filing deadline has passed, Alice, catch us up. Who is officially in and out of this mayor's race?
Yeah, so 11 people filed, 8 major challengers to Lightfoot. We have, people running from the left and then some to the right. It definitely looks like it will probably come out to a runoff, but beyond that, it's still a lot to be determined.
Dan, Christian, what do you think about the slots on the ballot? Does it matter?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I think what I was looking at more closely was how many signatures people had. Sometimes it's a show of force, and the way the system works here is you need a certain number, but they might challenge you if you don't have. Some of them might not be valid. Some people might not be registered voters, might not live in the city. And so if you challenge them, you can knock someone off the ballot. And that's sort of the phase we're going into. It seems the major candidates, including the mayor, have plenty of signatures. The rule of thumb is to have 3 times as many as the minimum that you need to make your petitions bulletproof for against challenges. I wasn't really that impressed with the numbers that came in. I think some of the major candidates have told me they were in the range of 40,000 something signatures. I don't know that anybody's gone through there outside of the campaigns and actually counted. But what you have ultimately is it's not a patronage system anymore. A lot of them are volunteers, like Alice said. Possibly some of them may be paid. We saw that with Rahm Emanuel's campaigns. But I remember candidates bringing in 90,000 signatures. And again, that's not a reflection of someone's support any more than lawn signs are. But it is a reflection of organization. And there are not the sort of organizations that existed in the past where you could reward people with patronage jobs, with public jobs that have good pay and good benefits for going out and doing this sort of campaign grunt work. And so I think we see a little bit of that weakness, and people have had to cobble together some coalitions.
And remind us, Alice, what was Lori Lightfoot's reason for turning in her signatures on the last day?
She pretty much said there's no magic to it. So there's, a bunch of speculation on her motivations here or there, but officially she just wanted to do it her way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Christian, you sat down for an interview with the mayor last week. How confident is she about her reelection?
Well, I mean, she says that she knows she's got some big challengers out there. She doesn't take this race lightly because she's the incumbent. She is putting her record forward, saying about the things that she's been able to do for this city, the improvements she's been able to make. This interview was done during a West improvement, streetscape improvement that they were doing, where they're pouring millions of dollars throughout different parts of the city. This was happening in South Chicago. So she's kind of standing on her record right now. At the time, that's when Ray Lopez had dropped out of the race. And one of the reasons why he said that he dropped out of that race is because he did not want her to be more powerful during a runoff. She kind of blew that off. She knows she's got an uphill battle.
Did she talk about priorities if she does get a second term?
She just talked about continuing to keep doing what she's been doing. That's pretty much what she said. She feels like she's done a good job. She's going to continue to do that job. But who knows what's going to happen in February when all this happens? You just don't know.
Right. Alice, Congressman Garcia just picked up a union endorsement this week, but so far, union support's pretty divided between the candidates, right?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely looking different than previous elections where, as we remember last time Garcia ran, he had CTU and SEIU's endorsements. And it seems this time, Brandon Johnson, him, and Lightfoot are all kind of jockeying for various union support. Obviously, Johnson has the big support from CTU and SEIU this time around.
Right.
But, Lightfoot still trying to quietly make connections with mostly trade unions. She has the endorsement, I believe, of the Plumbers Union, and she has, curried favor with hospitality unions after getting the casino deal through. Garcia's endorsement from Local 150 isn't to be counted out. They have loads of money, and it's going to be a pretty interesting landscape to monitor regarding union support.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you've been noticing some odd alliances in the mayor's race?
Well, look, politics make strange bedfellows, and there are people out there that are looking around and thinking different interest groups, including unions and public employee unions, that say, maybe Lori Lightfoot as a mayor is not our meal ticket. Maybe Chuy Garcia will be. And so you're starting, and in the case of Local 150, what I pointed out just on my Twitter was Local 150 is not the most progressive union. Historically, they've supported some Republicans. They're based outside of the city and in the suburbs and countryside, I believe. Somebody pointed out that their leadership is entirely white men. I haven't confirmed that, but they sent some screen grabs from their website that show that, clearly the leadership and the membership, and to a great extent,
lacking diversity.
Right. And so Chuy Garcia being a progressive alderman, maybe that's a little bit off brand, but you make deals with who you can make deals with. They were also, I think, big supporters of Mike Madigan at one time, the now indicted former Speaker of the House in Springfield. So, it'll be interesting to see some of the combinations we have may not be intuitive or seem natural.
We got a comment from Angela on YouTube. Angela says, "This is my first election in Chicago, and I must say the people on street corners asking for my signature downtown, it makes a lot more sense now." So, Dan, sticking with you for a moment, what's going on with former mayoral candidate Ray Lopez? He's making headlines. He says he wants the mayor to be investigated for a campaign contribution.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. It combines two of my favorite topics, I should say, soccer, and a lot of people know I'm a soccer fan, as well as political intrigue and alleged malfeasance. But in this case, what Ray Lopez is saying is we've already talked about how he's not a fan of the mayor, right, and probably the most vocal critic of the mayor on the city council. He's talking about a $25,000 donation that the mayor's reelection campaign got from a billionaire named Joe Mansueto, who owns the Chicago Fire soccer team in Major League Soccer. They play their games at Soldier Field, but now they're getting a new facility for training, I believe, out on the west side. It was a bit controversial. It took a while. She had to use her muscle, the mayor, to get it through a couple months back, because one of the controversial things is they're using Chicago Housing Authority land. So you have land that all this public housing got torn down over the last 20 years or so. And of course, the city and various administrations and the CHA promised that there would create new affordable housing Well, they haven't created nearly as much as they tore down, nearly as much as they said they would, and yet you're giving this piece of property to a professional sports team owned by a billionaire, and then that billionaire makes a donation. Now, I don't know if the ethics board or the inspector general, as Lopez wants, is going to do anything about that.
Do you think it's worth the IG looking into?
I think even when you look at his statement about it, it's an issue of perception more than, and the mayor's people say that they followed the rules. There are rules that are intended to prohibit this sort of appearance of pay to play, but there are loopholes in those rules that you could drive a $25,000 donation through.
This is
I would
Reset.
imagine.
I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Chicago Tribune political reporter Alice Yin, WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos, and Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5. A reminder, you can now watch the weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages, and you can leave us a comment or question or just talk to us in that YouTube chat box, and I may just read what you have to say about these stories on the air. Back to you, Alice. Monday was also the last day to file to run for city council. Chicago's longest-serving alderman also made some news that day. Fill us in.
Yeah, it was pretty much a 50-50 surprise for all of us. We knew he was out there for weeks collecting petitions.
And we're talking about Alderman Ed Burke.
Yeah. Sorry. And, I think even some of his supporters who were out there collecting petitions didn't really know what was going to happen with them. But it was pretty much wait until 5 p.m. Board of Elections confirmed to us he did not file to run. And that was how we found out about the news. But I don't know exactly what this means for him next. He hasn't spoken about what he's going to do about his position as 14th Ward Democratic Committee man. We know his wife also announced her retirement from the Illinois Supreme Court this year. But it definitely spells kind of the end of an era. Longest serving alderman, very closely associated with the Chicago machine, if you will.
Yeah.
Could spell a new era.
Well, Dan, Christian, what do you think? Your thoughts on Burke's legacy? What will that be?
That's so interesting. Look, fall from grace, and then a part of the council wars. When you look back at Chicago history, Alderman Burke has been a part of it. And so not to hear his name, I've been in Chicago for 16 years. And the day I showed up, I started at TTW. So we did a ton of politics when I was there. And that's why I got ingrained into the political structure of Chicago, which was totally different from where I came from in Philadelphia, to have 50 aldermen. And one of those most powerful ones, if not maybe the most powerful one at that time, Ed Burke. And now to see him step away, and truly this is a fall of grace. He's not going out. We've seen a lot of aldermen go down. We've seen a lot of politicians go down in just the past several months, being indicted, being, put behind bars, things that the whole Daley family, when you look at what's going on with Patrick Daley Thompson, it's just, it's shocking what's going to happen next here. And his wife, also Ed Burke's wife, stepping down as well. So it's definitely the end of a political era, and you want to see what's going to happen next with that.
Yeah. Thoughts on YouTube. Shamrock Bloom says, good riddance to Ed Burke. How could he even be eligible to run after being indicted?
Alice, hasn't been convicted yet.
Yeah, true. Alice, any idea who might want to replace Burke as a 14th Ward alderperson?
Yeah, 2 people filed for his open seat. I don't remember their exact names, but I think one of them is the chief of staff for Cook County Commissioner Alma Anaya. And the other is someone who's been closely tied with Burke's political circle. So it will be kind of an interesting matchup. I know last time he won re-election despite it happening after the FBI raid. And I think Chewy he endorsed a candidate against him, and it did not work out.
Let's go through a couple more comments on social. Chicago 675 says, didn't Mayor Lightfoot say she was going to be different from past mayors? This soccer story is a mess for her, and the whole CHA land swap isn't a good look for her either. The same person continues to say, even if there is a legal loophole, the mayor knows the spirit of the law. Turning to something very different, a new judge has taken over the massive court-ordered reform of the Chicago Police Department. Can you give us an update, Christian? These reforms are part of the 2019 consent decree.
Oh, you're talking about the consent decree hearing? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So there was a hearing this week involving the consent decree where a lot of people came forward. One of those individuals being Anjanette Young. We've heard about that story. It's been out there for some time. CBS2 did a huge investigation on that, and that was a raid that happened by the Chicago Police Department into the wrong home. And there was body cam video that her attorney at the time was able to get, and it was just shocking to see how she was treated during that. And of course, we have this consent decree that was born out of what happened with Laquan McDonald. We know that there was a police narrative in the Laquan McDonald case that did not match exactly what happened and did not match what happened on that body cam footage. And so this hearing was really about people complaining that there's not enough changes going on, especially with the foot chase policy or just police chase policy in general. And they want things to happen more quickly. And this really goes down the lines of race, correct? You've got black and white, and you have a lot of black people who live on the south and west sides of Chicago who are complaining how the police are treating them, that they're over-policing in certain communities. And so you had some people come up there and say this would not happen in a white community with white police officers, but it's happening in a black community with white police officers. So they want some change to happen more quickly. The Attorney General's office is still a part of this as well, also saying that change needs to happen more quickly. There is some pushback, and we have to wait and see if we are actually going to see some change, because we're still doing a lot of stories about police-involved shootings, waiting to have video released when those shootings happen, and waiting to see if more police officers will be charged. We haven't seen that happen greatly
Waiting to
yet.
see some results.
Yeah,
from
you
these
just
reforms.
haven't seen them, you know, and you wait for the COPA video to come out. You see the COPA video, people are shocked. And then you wait several months, and then maybe charges happen or don't happen, or they're less than what they think. And it's still created a lot of public outcry.
Yeah. And Alice, a former manager at the Cook County Land Bank Authority, has been charged with fraudulently purchasing and reselling vacant, blighted properties. So before we get into the details, what exactly is the Cook County Land Bank Authority?
Yeah, it's an authority created a few years ago to help. How do I describe it?
Redevelop.
Yeah, like they buy up properties of delinquent taxes, and then they redevelop them so that they don't go to waste.
I see. So they redevelop vacant properties. Essentially,
or they resell them, or they buy them up and then they find buyers for it.
I see.
Yeah.
And so what happened here with this former manager?
So he was an employee of the Cook County Land Bank, and I guess he's charged with wrongdoing in terms of flipping these properties.
And he also secretly set up a property management company that raked in more than $1 million. How did that scheme work?
I guess the details are still to be revealed, but it seems that there was probably some lack of oversight there, or because he was a manager, he was the one in charge of the oversight. So, yeah.
Interesting stuff. Well, we're going to pick up.
It's a board that was set up by Commissioner Bridget Gaynor, who's still the head of it, but they say that they were victimized by this.
Really?
Was the proper oversight there? I think questions remain, and we'll see how that develops. But it's certainly not a good look for, again, a progressive Democratic commissioner from the north side to set up this thing that's, has an altruistic goal to get these properties back on the tax rolls. And now it's got the feds crawling in there and, issuing this indictment of one of their employees.
Let's pick up the weekly news recap in just a moment with Christian Farr of NBC5, the Chicago Tribune's Alice Yin, and WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos. But first, we'll check back in with Lisa Labas. The National 988 Mental Health Hotline is up and running again after an outage.
Yeah, that hotline was out of service yesterday, but has been restored and is operating today. Anybody experiencing a mental health crisis was still able to reach a counselor by texting 988 or visiting the website 988lifeline.org to start a chat. A Health and Human Services spokesperson says the federal government is investigating that outage. The European Union has reached a deal for a $60 per barrel price cap on Russian oil. They needed to set that discounted price that other nations will pay by Monday when an EU embargo on Russian oil shipped by sea and a ban on insurance for those supplies will take effect. Documentary filmmaker Julia Reichert has died. Reichert won an Oscar for the film American Factory. Often called the godmother of American independent documentaries, Reichert made films for 50 years, telling stories of ordinary Americans, from auto workers dealing with plant closures and foreign investors to communists and female labor activists in the 1930s. Julia Reichert was 76 years old.
Monthly donations aren't the only way to make a sustaining impact at WBEZ. Now you can sign up for an annual donation. It's an easy way to set up a yearly gift and ensure your support for WBEZ doesn't slip off your list. Start an annual donation now, pick up a thank you gift like a mug or a hoodie, and then each year you'll get to pick a new one. With just a few moments of your time, you can make an impact for years to come. Start your annual donation now at wbez.org/donate.
I'm Scott Tong. Congress passes protections for same-sex and interracial marriages.
No matter who you are or who you love, you too deserve dignity and equal treatment under the law.
Also, the Democratic Party in the House gets a new slate of leaders. We'll discuss in our weekly roundtable. That's next time on Here and Now.
This afternoon at 2 o'clock on 91.5 WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by See Chicago Dance. The city of Chicago has declared 2022 the Year of Chicago Dance, celebrating Chicago's diverse dance community. Learn more at yearofchicagodance.com. Let Chicago move you. Also by the Museum of Contemporary Art, offering handmade jewelry and inspired designed objects from local artists. Purchases from the MCA store support Chicago's creatives in person or online at mcachicagostore.org. It is 12:27. This is WBEZ.
Back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. And if you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap where we make sense of the week's top local and state stories. Before the break, we got the latest on the mayoral race, but there is much more to get to.
A woman from Naperville received a sentence of probation today for her role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Lawmakers gather to commemorate former President Barack Obama's campaign announcement at the old state capitol in Springfield.
Democratic state lawmakers are proposing to ban the sale of assault rifles in Illinois.
Yesterday was the last day of veto sessions this year for Illinois lawmakers, and they finally approved changes to the controversial SAFE-T Act.
Our panel today is Chicago Tribune political reporter Alice Yin, WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos, and Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5 Chicago. All right, Christian, lawmakers are finishing up the year's final legislative session today. Let's take a look at what's been happening. First, changes to the controversial criminal justice law that's known as the SAFE-T Act. I know there's some 308 pages in this amendment, Christian. Give us a few of the highlights.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is cash bail, the elimination of it. This was really big during the governor's race, as we know, on the Republican side with Darren Bailey and the PAC that was supporting him. It was really about January 1st. The doors are going to swing open and a bunch of criminals, violent criminals, are going to be out on the street, and we're not going to be able to control them. Mm-hmm. On the other side of this, the supporters of the SAFE-T Act, which has been law in the state of Illinois for a while now, just was going to go into what was approved already was going to go into effect on January 1st of next year. Say there was a lot of misinformation put out there that was not going to happen, that the problems with cash bail overall is that if you're a poor person, you can't get out of jail and you can't give yourself an effective defense because you don't have the money, and people who do have the money are able to get out, have an effective defense, and be able to defend themselves against certain crimes.
And to your earlier point, let's not forget the SAFE-T Act. It played a prominent role in the midterms, right?
It did.
Republicans were using it to attack Democrats, saying, they're soft on crime.
Right. And big here in Illinois. I mean, just talking about it in every election that was going on. I mean, I think it even ended up in the governor's race in Arizona as well. So there was a proposed changes to it brought by Senator Robert Peters. And those changes are 308 pages. And really what Senator L.G. Sims, who also supports this, had told me is that it was really more of a clarification of what the SAFE-T Act is all about, especially as it relates to cash bail, that judges will still have some discretion in terms of holding somebody who may be a threat to the community. So it doesn't simply mean that they're going to be running out on the street, which is what a lot of those political ads kind of suggested. Talking to Representative Jim Durkin, he still felt like the Democrats ran this by the Republicans in the state. They were given 24 hours to look at this new proposed change. He didn't think that they had the votes to do this, but they did. And so now we're waiting to see the governor sign this. The governor backs the elimination of cash bail as well. He still supports the Safety Act, but he did agree that changes needed to be made. But there's still a lot of concern on the Republican side, especially for law enforcement and prosecutors, about what this means in a courtroom after January 1st.
Right.
They still believe that there's going to be a lot of confusion in terms of how to handle certain defendants.
Interesting. And also happening in this legislative session, Illinois lawmakers are officially divesting state investments from Russian banks and companies. What are the details?
Yeah, they are trying to, punish Russia and Belarus, which is a sort of puppet state of the Putin regime. Illinois has a large Ukrainian community. We have a lot of Ukrainian refugees. There's one has a locker next to my kid at school, and the sympathy is with them, and obviously our government in Washington is with them in the State Department. But, is it, as a practical matter, something that's going to make a big difference? One of the biggest, if not the biggest pension fund, TRS, the teachers' pension fund, said they have $4.27 million invested in Russia, which is 0.007% of their portfolio. But, passed unanimously. And in this day and age, we're talking about the Safety Act. That was a party line vote. This measure to support Ukraine and punish Russia for its aggression against an independent neighboring country got bipartisan, unanimous support in Springfield. So that's one of the few things that continue to unite most, if not all, of our elected officials at the state and federal levels.
And Christian, Illinois Democrats said that they're hoping to introduce a major gun control bill in January, too.
Yes, and this is going to be a massive gun control bill. It would outlaw the sale of assault weapons, prevent most residents from under the age of 21 from legally buying a gun. This is really, really born out of what happened in Highland Park. I was working that day, and it was kind of devastating to get that phone call to hear about what happened. People going, as a television broadcast reporter, covering a July 4th parade is kind of commonplace, especially in the suburbs. And then this to happen in Highland Park, unsuspecting people being shot and killed, and then finding out the details afterwards in terms of how he was able to acquire that weapon. And so Senator Bob Morgan is the one, he was at the parade, and he's saying that Democrats hope to pass this bill in the lame duck session in early January. They're going to have public hearings that should be held this month. But, it's a big deal. People are concerned about their rights, their gun rights, and things of that nature. So there's going to be a lot of pushback with this. There was pushback initially when they had this assault weapons ban. There's a lot of people that say that when that ban was lifted, that's why we've ended up with all of these mass shootings. Who knows? This is definitely an issue where, either you're a gun lover or you're a gun hater. And that's kind of where you kind of have to sit and figure out, what are you going to do with this? Because no one wants another Highland Park, but no one can agree on exactly why we ended up with that.
Right. Online, our friend Shamrock Bloom says, please, that is the absolute minimum we could do. So a lot of thoughts there. Dan, you wrote a story this week. It was about Illinois State Senator Michael Hastings. What's going on with him?
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. There is a senator who's been accused of domestic violence by his ex-wife. His divorce was sealed, which is pretty unusual. We at WBEZ went to court in Will County to get that unsealed. It was fought by Senator Hastings. We won October 25th, shortly before the election, but after early voting had begun, we got those files. They detailed those allegations more thoroughly. He denies them. He continues to run, even though Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's of the same party, they're both Democrats, tells him that he should step down. And he wins re-election against his Republican challenger by less than 1% of the vote. So where does this leave Senate President Don Harmon? And he decided that he would not, he told us, at least in an interview recently, that he will not reappoint Senator Hastings to head the important Committee on Energy and Public Utilities, which oversees, ComEd and other public utilities like that, and it's very influential on environmental issues. So as far as we know, Hastings will be back on. My understanding is he hasn't been in Springfield the last couple times that the lawmakers have been down there since the election.
Well, a new historical plaque went up in Springfield this week. It was honoring where Barack Obama launched his campaign for president. Let's listen to a clip of what Illinois' Speaker of the House, Emanuel Chris Welch, had to say.
When people come to the state capitol and visit this place, they will forever be reminded of the generational change that President Obama started. They will forever be inspired to hope. They will forever be inspired to believe in change that we can all believe in.
So I don't know if you saw this, Christian, but yesterday Obama was in Georgia. He was campaigning for Democrat Raphael Warnock in the state's Senate runoff. I don't know how you feel, but does the former president seem to you like he's still got that star power?
I don't know. My personal opinion, I think he does.
Yeah.
And I think there was a clip that went viral where somebody was like,
he was a real comedian.
Yeah, and he really was. I mean, he was talking about the whole werewolf thing with Herschel Walker.
Yes.
I mean, I think he still does, and so does his wife. I mean, she's going to have, I think, another one of her big book release launches that she's going to be
correct.
having, and
Yeah.
so
this week, I think.
Yeah, and people are still buying tickets and going to see that. I think so, and as you look forward to, we could see Donald Trump running for we're going to see it. He's running for president once again.
He's made the announcement
while still being investigated by that January 6th committee, and so you still got Joe Biden sitting in that chair as president, who was able to essentially dethrone him. So the landscape has not changed that much. We still have those same players that are out there, and Barack Obama was a part of that. I mean, he's a part of Chicago, Illinois history, history of the United States, history of the world.
Absolutely.
By what he did in his, being able to be reelected. Yeah, I think he still does have that star power. Look, I was going through my Instagram feed. He popped up and I looked,
Exactly.
I took a chuckle and moved on.
Exactly. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, we are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Chicago Tribune political reporter Alice Yin, WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos, and Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5 Chicago. We're still online on YouTube and Facebook if you prefer to watch. Over to you, Alice, because former Vice President and Indiana Governor Mike Pence was in town this week. He was speaking before about 300 people at the Union League Club of Chicago. Tell us why he was in town and what he had to say.
Yeah, I believe he was, promoting his book tour and I guess trying to get himself out there as he thinks about his plans for 2024 and beyond. He's kind of like, I guess, presenting this weird divide in the Republican Party where they know that, Trump is meeting with some very bad people and they should disavow those people, but they don't know what to do about him. They are afraid to cross him, but I think they're a little less afraid than they maybe were earlier this year or a year or two ago. It remains to see what he's going to announce, but he definitely is, trying to make his rounds.
Well, did he at least give any hint about whether he's going to run for president?
I believe all he said was wait till after the holidays and we'll see.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
What did Mike Pence say though about Trump's, Mar-a-Lago dinner with Kanye West, who now we know goes by Ye? He had dinner with Ye and Nick Fuentes, who've both become notorious for their anti-Semitic comments. Did he say anything more?
He disavowed those two figures, but he kind of was like threading the line with, directly criticizing Trump. He, in his book, which he still stands by, he says, I don't think Trump is an anti-Semite. I don't think he's a racist, et cetera, et cetera. And though that quote might go on to haunt him later, whatever his plans are, but he's standing by it.
You guys following this stuff? It's hard not to see all of the Ye just keeps trending for random things, but both Ye and Nick Fuentes, they have strong Chicago ties, right?
Oh, big time. But Kanye said he was going to go at DEFCON 5. That's what he said he was going to do.
Sure did.
He's clearly doing that right now. Being connected to Nick Fuentes. I don't know. It's troubling. I think Kanye would have kind of led to that Chicago legend kind of thing because of his music, his lyrics, the things he kind of stood for. I don't know. I think people are still troubled by just what they hear from him. I don't know what this means to be connected to Donald Trump at this time. Now you've got, Mike Pence commenting on that. The red wave didn't happen that we thought was going to happen. It's an interesting political time.
Yeah, and for anyone not familiar, Nick Fuentes grew up in the western suburbs, graduated in 2016 from Lyons Township High School. He was student council president, but he's a far-right video streamer who's been kicked off nearly every major social media platform for hate speech violations. We know, I think a lot of us woke up this morning to the update that Ye has also now been suspended.
By Elon Musk himself, apparently.
Right.
Who's
Shocking.
now the arbiter and the owner. Nick Fuentes, though, it's not just the anti-Semitism. I've listened to some of the comments, very misogynistic as well. Very young guy, but has risen to prominence by saying some of the most inflammatory things you can imagine.
Yeah.
And then shows up at Mar-a-Lago with Kanye.
And Trump praised him, right? I mean, he liked Nick Fuentes, thought he was a great guy, but had no idea anything about him,
Yeah.
And so what does that say about, a person who's running for president?
So, Christian, as we're discussing the rise of anti-Semitism, I know that your wife, who's Karen Jordan over at ABC7, she talked to former Fox 32 reporter Larry Yellen this week. He shared his own experience with this. Fill us in.
Yeah, just the background to that. And again, this is for my wife. She's the one who did the story. Shout
out to Karen.
Yeah, shout out to Karen Jordan, ABC7. She works for the enemy. But did I say that?
It was a great story.
It was a great story. And Larry Yellen, if anybody doesn't remember him, fantastic reporter at Fox 32, an attorney, but just whenever you ended up on a story with Larry Yellen, you stood up a little bit more, you looked around a little bit more because I felt like I was in the presence of royalty. He was a mentor. I consider him a fantastic guy, but retired some years ago. His parents, he's from Waukegan, and his parents are buried in a Waukegan cemetery, and it was desecrated. And swastikas and things of that nature. And so he was outspoken about this. He wanted people to really know after this happened. They've kind of cleaned up those headstones after those anti-Semitic symbols were placed there. And, he wanted people to really know that he grew up in this community. He helped this community. His parents helped this community. And a lot of the people who were impacted by this, the families, came to his bar mitzvah when he was a child, celebrated with him. I believe his father was in World War II, was a B-17 bombardier. And so these are people who really helped, part of that greatest generation, help shape this country. And, here you are laid to rest. You should lay to rest in peace. And then to have this happen is just really shocking.
It really is tragic.
And I'm glad that he spoke out and said something. He's been taking an active role in politics, I believe, since he's retired. But he was a sharp reporter, fantastic mentor to many of us who kind of came up in Chicago news. And so I'm glad he was able to speak out, and I'm glad that people paid attention to the story.
Well, before we take a quick pause, I'm coming back to you, Dan, because, where there's anti-Semitism, there's often white supremacy. This week, the sentencing of the head of the Oath Keepers made national news. Here in Illinois, a Naperville woman was sentenced to 18 months probation for participating in that January 6th uprising. Details?
Yeah, Dan Frankowski of Naperville was described as an online follower of the Oath Keepers, that violent seditionist, insurrectionist group. And she said she was in the Capitol for 11 minutes on January 6, 2021, during that uprising that was squashed. But she got 18 months probation and 100 hours community service. I thought the most moving part to me was she was messaging one of her other fellow rioters and said, if Trump doesn't get this done, we are going to jail. But as some will point out, she is not going to prison after all. And so some people look at that and have communicated with me when I tweeted that story that they think that it's another example of kind of soft treatment of people that participated in the events of January 6, 2021 and wanted to change the outcome of a free and fair election.
Can't believe we're almost at 2 years from that date. Anyway, we'll take a quick pause. That's WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos, Christian Farr of NBC5 Chicago, and Chicago Tribune's Alice Yin. Much more weekly news recap to come, but first back over to Lisa, because a national rail strike has been averted.
Yeah, that's right. President Biden today signing a bill to avert a freight rail strike he said could have plunged the U.S. into recession. The deal will bind rail companies and workers to a proposed settlement that was reached in September between rail companies and union leaders. Meantime, President Biden says Democrats should give up restrictive caucuses and move to champion diversity in the order of their presidential primary calendar. Now, this recommendation would deal a major blow to Iowa's decades-long status as the state that leads off this process. And he told Democrats he'd like to see South Carolina move to the front of the calendar and that Michigan and Georgia should move into the first 5 states that hold primaries. An army of engineers from Ukraine's phone companies has mobilized to help the public and policymakers stay in touch during repeated Russian missile and drone strikes. Engineers are working around the clock to maintain or restore service, sometimes braving minefields to do so. Engineers had to start up diesel generators this week after Russian strikes took out the electricity cell phone towers usually rely on. It is 12:45 WBEZ.
On the next Science Friday, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Swing makes me happy. It's something very deeply satisfying. It's definitely an attitude and a confidence.
We've got the science behind that swing. Jazz it up with us on the next Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Science Friday, today at 1 on WBEZ Chicago.
Each month, WBEZ produces a ton of events, and you're invited to all of them. Check out all the ways to connect with us virtually and in person at wbez.org/events.
WBEZ is supported by Akiba Schechter Jewish Day School and Community Early Childhood Program, creating a family of learners committed to responsible citizenship. Applications open at akibaschechter.org.
And WBEZ is supported by ComEd, dedicated to upgrading the electric grid to support additional electric vehicle chargers for residents and businesses. More information can be found at comed.com/clean energy. ComEd, powering lives. A kind of a mild day, cloudy and quite windy, a high near 50 degrees, right now 48. Continued windy tonight, a little rain, a low of 24. Very blustery and cold tomorrow with a high of 27. A little nicer on Sunday with sunshine, a high of 41, 43 and rainy on Monday. 12:47 WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap where we make sense of the top local and state stories from recent days. Now, before the break, we talked about what's been happening in Springfield. We also discussed former Vice President Mike Pence's recent visit to Chicago. And still with us, Chicago journalists Alice Yin, Dan Mihalopoulos, and Christian Farr. The families of 16 hockey players from St. Ignatius College Prep, they filed a lawsuit against the truck driver that slammed into their school bus a few weeks ago. Christian, what's the latest on that?
Yeah, that happened on November 12th. It was pretty shocking. I covered that the day that it happened. This was in Indiana. There were some junior varsity hockey players from St. Ignatius going through an intersection on a bus. They had just finished up a tournament, and this truck driver, whose blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit in Indiana, slammed into them. And then several of those hockey players were injured. In fact, one still remains in the hospital to this day. And so on Monday, there was a press conference, and 16 St. Ignatius hockey players and their families announced a lawsuit against that truck driver and also the company that he worked for. And I think some of the blame has been put on the fact that it's been difficult to do hiring after the pandemic, that people haven't overtaken those jobs that were there previously. And is there enough training? Was this truck driver on the road too long?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what happened here, because luckily none of these players died in this crash. But some of them are still recovering from some very serious injuries. So it's also, I think, sort of an indictment on, how we handle the trucking industry and making certain that we have responsible truck drivers on the road because people's lives are on the line.
100%. Another tragic story this week. 2 children, they were among 5 people dead in a north suburban Buffalo Grove home. Any idea what this was about, Dan?
Well, the police there are not saying a lot, but it's a tragic situation. 5 people in the same family, all stabbed multiple times. The family's name is the Kisliaks, Kisliaks, and is someone with a quote unquote unpronounceable name. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But it was Andrew, 39, Vera, his wife, 36, Vivian, 6 years old, Amelia, 4 years old, their children, and Andre Kisliak's mother, Lilia, 67, all found dead. And people are piecing together there was a divorce. They were going through orders of protection, foreclosure, but who perpetrated the murders? The police haven't said yet. But
This is heartbreaking.
As of 11 o'clock or noon when we came on the air.
Wow. All right, shifting gears. Winter may not officially be here until December 21st, but that's not what the city thinks. They've started their winter parking ban officially yesterday. And so for anyone who's not familiar with this driving ritual, Dan, I'd love for you to get us up to speed.
Yeah, we have to drive around town on assignment, and unlike the TV guys, we can't park illegally everywhere, Christian.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, but seriously, 3 to 7 a.m. from December 1st to April 1st, when there's more than 2 inches of snow on the ground, don't take the risk. You don't want to be ticketed and towed. They want you out of the way so they can go and plow Ed Burke's street before everyone else. So.
Is that a little dig?
That happened. That used to happen.
We used to hear about it. That is true. That is true. That is
It was
true.
a little bit of a
Is this why
self-serving pat on the
we
back.
were talking a moment ago, Alice, that you don't drive? Is this why? To avoid these kinds of complications?
Yeah, pretty much.
So though we may not love the cold weather, folks, it is perfect for staying inside and doing things like maybe watching the World Cup. I'm crushed. Canada's out.
Well,
but you guys, the U.S.
Still going strong.
You're going to be facing the
Join
Netherlands
us.
tomorrow. Yes, I'm here. I've joined. What have you been hearing? You've been talking with World Cup fans, Dan.
Yeah, well, I kind of scammed an assignment last weekend. I was on duty, and I said, well, I'd like to pitch a feature and go and watch the World Cup with people. So I
You are
hung
a
out.
smart man.
And your editor fell for that?
It was a very street smart thing to do. I found my way to the Croatian Cultural Center for their victory over Canada. The Dank House in Lincoln Square with the Germans, and I was with the Argentinians at Barraenye on Elston. They're still alive with Lionel Messi, but tomorrow I'll be in my basement with my soccer scarves and other paraphernalia watching the USA at 9 in the morning.
We all just got a visual
against
of that.
the Dutch. Yeah.
Dan in his basement.
Might be a nice basement. You never know.
That's true.
Cedar paneling.
There you go.
What do you got in this basement, Dan?
Soccer scarves, beer, cedar paneling.
So in addition to watching the World Cup, some families are going to spend the weekend looking for that perfect Christmas tree. I don't want to get you in trouble, Christian. I don't want to have you looking like a Grinch out here, but you did report people might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah.
Why?
So the problem is that there was a drought. And so because there was a drought, there's a limited number of Christmas trees and varieties of Christmas trees. So when you head to the lot, now I wouldn't know this because I've never had a real Christmas tree.
Me neither.
My mother.
Team artificial tree.
My mother is team artificial tree. She raised me artificial trees, so I've never had one.
Same.
So I actually had to ask, is this expensive? And it was. I mean, people used to spending $60 to $70 to buy a Christmas tree. They're paying more than $100 for a Christmas tree that they would have gotten last year. Because of that drought, you've got the limited number of Christmas trees coming in. But people said it's not going to ruin their Christmas. It's one time a year that I have to do this. So if I got to pay the bloated amount, I'm going to pay the bloated amount. No one was saying, no, I'm not buying a Christmas tree this year.
What about you, Alex, Dan? Are you real tree, artificial tree? What team are you on?
A real tree. I mean, we just always go to the parking lot of the local shopping center, and they unpack them from Merrill, Wisconsin. They're nice people, and they sell us some maple syrup too. And I try to get my family to go out and maybe cut one down, but this is the tradition to just go a mile away.
Christmas vacation.
Yeah,
they unpack
see,
them
that's the
on
work I don't want to
Thanksgiving.
do. I don't want to cut anything down.
Nope.
Time.
No. Pull it out of my attic.
Yeah, exactly. Same tree.
It smells better.
Years
though.
in a row. I don't know about that smell. We'll debate that. Tell me on YouTube, what do you think about the smell? I'd love to know. So before we go, I'm wondering if any stories this week really stuck with y'all, like maybe something that you were surprised about or something that you thought was just underreported. Alice?
I'm definitely going to be looking more into the aldermanic races, and I think, all readers and citizens should. The mayor's race gets a lot of attention, as it should, but
Doesn't it, though? Yeah, a lot of focus.
Yeah, but there's only 50 aldermen in Chicago. They wield a lot of power. They
Only-
vote on
only
legislation.
50.
Yeah,
Only 50.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's going to be 11 open seats come February. There are 15 aldermen, I believe, who will retire by that end, or they already have retired, or they got convicted of a felony. So city council could look very different come May, and I think there's not as much interest, obviously, compared to some bigger races, but people should be engaged and think about local issues and look into candidates that they are interested in.
Yeah, very good points.
Yeah, I agree. Having covered city council races, that's very important to people on an elemental level, and their line of communication, first line of contact with for garbage carts and things of that nature. Plus, there has been already a lot of change over the last few elections in a city council that had become pretty stagnant. And so you have a lot of these, Burks and Zaleskis and Mells, who were these figures that were there for decades and decades. Burke got on the city council before I was born. Think about that, and
yeah.
look how old I am.
That's a long time ago.
This is something to watch for, and also to look at the sort of alliances that are formed. I also think that Buffalo Grove situation has been really not gotten as much attention for whatever reason. It really reminds me of the horrible Lori Dan domestic murders in the North Shore quite a few years ago now, and are we becoming so kind of immune to reacting to these sorts of things when we have so much violence in our society? I don't know.
All coming to us at once. What about you, Christian? What's on your radar? Maybe something that happened already, or something that you've got coming down the pike?
Well, I agree with Dan on the Buffalo Grove story. I mean, I think months prior to that, maybe a year, there was a similar story done where a father had killed his two children, and I think it got underreported. I mean, he ran from police; they had to go track him down.
Yeah.
So it was just shocking and devastating. I was out there covering it yesterday, and just hearing the details that a divorce, foreclosure ends in this. And so I think it's one of those shocking things. I want to see what happens with the Safety Act. I really want to see what happens on January 1st. I think there was a lot of fear mongering that was going on. I don't know if that's correct. I want to see how the justice system is going to work in Cook County, one of the largest courtrooms in the country. And, I go there every once in a while. I want to see how that's going to function. I've heard from a lot of prosecutors who complain about it.
That's going to be one to watch for sure. Well, I just want to give us some more love here as we wrap up. Shamrock Bloom says, I love Dan Mihalopoulos and his many important breaking stories. He is a WBEZ treasure.
I love you too.
Bill says, loving this YouTube stream. Thank you for mentioning it on your radio broadcast. Well, you are welcome, Bill. We've got Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5, Chicago Tribune political reporter Alice Yin, and WBEZ investigative reporter Dan Mihalopoulos. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That is it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Linnea Dominic, Brenda Ruiz, Micah Yason, Claire Hyman, Michael Liptrot, Andrea Guthman, Andrew Merriweather, and Sarah Stark. Dan Tucker's our executive producer. Ethan Schwab and Haley Bloomquist were our engineers this week. Monday on the show, we're going to hit the gym. With the new year approaching, many of us are making goals to be more active, but finding the right gym can be a challenge. So we want to hear from you. If you've had trouble finding the right place, you felt intimidated by exercise, or you just have gym horror stories, leave us a message at 888-915-9945. Again, 888-915-9945. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thanks for listening and have a great day. We'll meet again soon.
It is 12:58 and Science Friday coming up next. Speaking of Friday, it is $5 Friday here at WBEZ. It's a day to celebrate the collective impact of small monthly donations. And when you start your monthly donation of $5 or more, you'll be able to pick up our new WBEZ fuzzy socks, and they are fuzzy. Get yours now at WBEZ.org/donate. WBEZ is supported by the Abe and Ida Cooper Foundation, commemorating Fred Cooper by supporting programs that highlight current issues of racism, equality,